The air on Zorix 9 was thick with humidity, a stark contrast to the dry, sterile atmosphere of Earth's military bases. Captain Eloise Ellie Richards wiped the sweat from her brow as she surveyed the dense jungle from the drop shuttle's hatch. Her team of Special Forces soldiers stood behind her, ready to disembark and face whatever the planet had in store. She was used to hostile environments, but this felt different. The trees were unnaturally tall, their leaves a deep, luminous green, and the ground hummed with the faint vibration of something alive just beneath the surface. "Watch yourselves," Ellie called over her comm to her team. "We're here to establish a peaceful presence, not to start a war." Her words were met with quiet nods. She could feel their tension, though. They were all on edge. It had been years since humanity had made contact with the Xylar, and so far, all attempts at peaceful negotiations had been met with cold resistance. But this was different. They weren't here for talks, they were here to make contact, to prove that humanity wasn't a threat, that their arrival on this remote planet wasn't another act of colonization. They had a message to deliver: peace, not conflict. With a sharp exhale, Ellie gestured to her second-in-command, Sergeant Jonah Reese. "Reese, take point. Keep a low profile. I want to know what we're dealing with before we move in." Reese gave her a quick salute before leading the group into the jungle. His large frame moved effortlessly through the foliage, his dark eyes scanning every inch of the landscape. Ellie followed closely behind, the hairs on the back of her neck prickling as she observed the strange, shifting shadows in the trees above. Minutes passed in silence, save for the occasional rustle of leaves or the far-off call of some unseen creature. Ellie's instincts were on high alert, she was used to ambushes and unpredictable threats. But everything about this planet screamed unknown, and that was far more dangerous than any visible enemy. Then it came. The first crackle of energy in the air. A bolt of searing plasma whizzed past Ellie's ear, missing her by mere inches. She whipped her head around to see the source, a shimmering figure in the trees. Another shot, and then another, each one faster than the last. She didn't need to think, she dove to the ground, instinctively rolling behind a thick tree trunk for cover. "Ambush!" Ellie barked into her comms. "Take cover! Return fire!" Her team scattered, each soldier finding shelter behind whatever they could, a boulder, a tree, even the remains of an ancient alien structure half buried in the dirt. Ellie's heart raced, adrenaline pumping through her veins as she returned fire with her plasma rifle. But every time she aimed, the Xylar, whoever they were, seemed to vanish into the shadows, reappearing in different spots as if the jungle itself was conspiring against them. Ellie had seen plenty of ambushes in her time, but this was something new. They were being outmaneuvered. Outclassed. "Reese, status," she shouted, keeping her voice steady despite the growing panic in her chest. "Taking fire, Captain," came Reese's voice, sharp and clipped. "But I'm in position. I've got eyes on them, Xylar, at least 5. They're circling us." Ellie's mind raced. They were clearly being tested. She had to act fast, or this peaceful mission would end in disaster. "Grenades," she ordered. "On my mark, throw them toward the clearing to the west." 3 seconds. The air crackled with tension as her soldiers prepared. Ellie counted down in her head, eyes scanning the foliage for movement. The moment the countdown hit 0, she screamed, "Now!" 3 grenades sailed through the air, their explosive charges creating a blast that shook the very ground beneath them. The Xylar's hiding places exploded into a shower of dirt and debris. Ellie's soldiers, using the chaos to their advantage, pressed forward, firing at anything that moved. But the Xylar weren't ordinary enemies. They were swift and deadly, their bodies moving with unnatural grace, dodging plasma fire like it was second nature. Ellie saw one of them, tall, regal, and nearly glowing, emerge from the trees. She was unlike anything Ellie had ever seen before, skin like molten silver, eyes glowing with a fierce intelligence. Ellie didn't hesitate. She aimed and fired, sending a bolt of energy toward the figure. The shot hit, but it didn't drop her. Instead, the figure merely staggered, her alien eyes narrowing. Ellie felt a wave of dread flood her chest. This was no ordinary warrior. "Move!" Ellie barked, dragging her team back toward the shuttle. But before they could take more than a few steps, the alien leader raised her hand, and the world seemed to stop. The air shimmered with an electric charge as a strange field of energy surrounded them. "You dare bring violence to our land?" The voice came from the alien leader, her tone cold and laced with power. Ellie's rifle was still aimed, but she didn't pull the trigger. This was the moment, the first real contact, and she couldn't afford to waste it. The enemy could sense her hesitation, though. They knew she was unsure, and that made her vulnerable. The alien leader stepped closer, her silver skin shimmering in the fading sunlight. Ellie's breath caught in her throat. There was something strangely hypnotic about the alien, something ancient and powerful. "I am Seraphis," the alien spoke, her voice a melodic, almost haunting sound. "And you have made a grave mistake." Ellie swallowed hard, trying to maintain control of the situation. She knew her team was injured, and they couldn't fight their way out of this, at least not without a better strategy. "We didn't come to fight," Ellie said, her voice steady despite the intensity of the moment. "We came to talk. We came for peace." Seraphis's eyes studied her for a long moment, as if trying to discern the truth in Ellie's words. The other Xylar warriors remained in position, watching intently. "You are weak," Seraphis said, though there was a strange curiosity in her tone. "You cannot understand the strength it takes to survive in this world. You are not welcome here." Ellie's heart pounded. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was a declaration of war. "We're not here to take anything from you," Ellie replied. "We just want to learn. To understand. To offer help." Seraphis's lips curled into a smile, a predatory, almost amused expression. "Help," she mused. "We don't need your help." Ellie stood her ground. "Maybe you don't. But I'm offering it anyway." And in that moment, Ellie realized, this wasn't just a mission to establish peace. It was a test. A test of humanity's will, its ability to endure and to fight for what was right, even when every other option seemed impossible. Seraphis stepped forward, raising her weapon in a silent threat. Ellie knew this could go either way. She had to make the next move. And for the first time in a long while, Ellie Richards felt a deep, inexplicable sense of uncertainty. The air around Ellie seemed to crackle with an unspoken challenge as Seraphis stood before her, a towering figure of power and unyielding confidence. The silver-skinned alien exuded an aura of superiority, her eyes glowing with something more ancient than Ellie could comprehend. Ellie gripped her plasma rifle tighter, the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders. Her team was injured, scattered, and she was alone in the face of an enemy who could end this entire mission with a simple flick of her wrist. For a heartbeat, the jungle seemed to hold its breath. No one moved. The Xylar warriors around Seraphis watched, their weapons drawn, waiting for their leader's signal. Ellie could feel her pulse pounding in her temples, each second stretching longer than the last. If she didn't do something soon, this could turn into a full-scale attack. "You said you came to talk," Seraphis's voice broke the silence, her tone measured but laden with an unmistakable edge of distrust. "But I see nothing but violence in your eyes. Your people bring nothing but conflict wherever they go." Ellie's heart clenched at the accusation. It wasn't wrong. The history of humanity, especially in dealing with other species, was fraught with moments of reckless conquest and misunderstanding. But Ellie knew they weren't here for that. Her mission was clear: peace, not war. She took a step forward, cautiously lowering her rifle, not in surrender, but in an attempt to show her intention. "We came to learn, Seraphis," Ellie said, her voice firm, yet laced with the kind of quiet desperation that only comes when the stakes are life or death. "We didn't come to take what's yours. We came because we need to understand. Humanity, we've made mistakes. We've done things we regret. But we're trying to be better." Seraphis studied her with those piercing, luminous eyes. It was a long, uncomfortable silence that followed, the air charged with the weight of their conversation. Ellie could see the Xylar leader's gaze flicker momentarily toward the surrounding jungle, perhaps weighing her next words carefully. Then, finally, Seraphis spoke again, her voice soft, almost mocking. Your people, trying to be better? I have seen the history of your kind. How many have you enslaved, destroyed, and abandoned in the name of progress? Her lips twitched in a bitter smile. And now you come to me with promises of peace? Ellie clenched her fists, her jaw tightening, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was it, the heart of the mission. There was no more room for doubt, for hesitation. She needed to convince Seraphis, and through her, the Xylar, that humanity was more than the sum of its past mistakes. I don't deny our past, Ellie replied, her voice low but resolute. But we're not that now. We're evolving. We've seen what we can become, and it's not who we were. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Seraphis. I'm asking for a chance to show you that humanity can stand beside you, not as conquerors, but as equals. The air around them seemed to shift. For a brief moment, Ellie thought she saw something like amusement flash across Seraphis's face, but it was quickly replaced by an unreadable mask. The alien leader raised her hand, signaling for her warriors to lower their weapons. You speak of equality, Seraphis said, her voice measured but still tinged with suspicion. And yet, you come to our world, uninvited, with weapons and soldiers. You speak of peace, but I see no peace in your eyes. Your people do not know how to stop when they've taken what they want. I'm not here to take anything, Ellie said, swallowing the bitter lump in her throat. I'm here because we need to learn. If we can't, then we're as lost as you think we are. And that's the truth. Seraphis's gaze softened ever so slightly, and for the first time, Ellie saw a flicker of something that could almost be considered curiosity. Still, it was too soon to relax. The Xylar leader was testing her, pushing her to see how far humanity was willing to go to prove its resolve. If you want peace, you must show me you understand what that means, Seraphis said, her voice now carrying an undeniable challenge. Your people must prove their worth, prove they are not the same destructive force I have seen in the galaxy. And if you fail, you will never leave this world alive. Ellie took a deep breath, the weight of the ultimatum sinking in. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating, and the eyes of her team were on her. She had no choice but to rise to the challenge. You have my word, she said, her voice calm but unwavering. We'll do whatever it takes. No matter what, we will prove we can be trusted. A long silence followed, and for a moment, Ellie thought Seraphis might turn her down outright. The Xylar leader's eyes flickered over her soldiers, over the wreckage of the battle they'd just endured, and Ellie could feel the scrutiny like a physical weight. It felt like they were at a precipice. One wrong move, and all of this, everything, would come crashing down. Finally, Seraphis nodded, her expression unreadable. Then prove it, she said simply. Come. You will face a trial. If you pass, I will consider allowing your people to live on this world. Ellie's heart skipped a beat. A trial? Seraphis's eyes gleamed. A test of endurance, of character, of strength. Only then will you have earned the right to speak for your species. Ellie didn't flinch. She could feel her team's eyes on her, waiting for her response. She didn't have time to think about the implications of Seraphis's words, not when their lives, and perhaps the future of humanity's relationship with the Xylar, were at stake. We're ready, Ellie said, her voice steady. She locked eyes with Seraphis, a silent vow passing between them. She wasn't just going to fight for her people's survival. She was going to fight for their future. Very well, Seraphis replied. Follow me. As the Xylar leader turned and began to lead them deeper into the jungle, Ellie glanced at her team. There was fear in their eyes, fear of the unknown, of what might come next. But Ellie had something they didn't, resolve. No matter the outcome of this trial, she wasn't going to let this mission fail. Not for her, not for her team, and certainly not for humanity's future. The jungle swallowed them whole as they marched on, and Ellie steeled herself for whatever came next. She had no idea what kind of trial lay ahead, but she was prepared to face it head-on. After all, the stakes couldn't be higher. They had to prove themselves, if humanity was to ever find its place in this vast, unforgiving galaxy. The jungle closed in around them as they moved deeper into the unknown, every step taking them further away from the shuttle and deeper into enemy territory. The Xylar's jungle, dense and wild, felt alive in a way that unsettled Ellie. The air was thick with moisture, each breath heavy, and yet there was an eerie silence that hung like a shroud. No wildlife called out, no breeze stirred the trees. It was as if the planet itself was waiting, watching. Seraphis led the way with effortless grace, her silver skin glimmering in the dim light that filtered through the canopy. Behind her, Ellie and her team followed, their footsteps cautious and their weapons at the ready. They weren't entirely sure where they were heading, but one thing was certain, the trial Seraphis spoke of was inevitable, and they were walking right into it. Ellie's eyes darted between her soldiers, all of them bruised from the earlier battle. Reese had a gash on his arm, and Corporal Harris limped slightly, favoring his right leg. They had no time to rest. This wasn't about survival now, it was about proving they weren't the enemies Seraphis believed them to be. "Stay sharp," Ellie whispered to her team, her voice barely audible over the distant hum of the jungle. "This isn't over." Seraphis didn't turn to acknowledge her. She moved with a sense of purpose, clearly in control of everything around her. After what felt like an eternity, the jungle finally opened up to a clearing, and Ellie's breath caught. Before them stood an ancient stone structure, half buried by the relentless growth of the jungle. It was nothing like anything Ellie had ever seen, towering stone pillars intertwined with strange vines and symbols carved into the walls that pulsed with an eerie light. It was clear that this was no ordinary place. "This is where the trial will take place," Seraphis said, her voice low and almost reverential. "You will face the trial of endurance. Survive, and you will have proven your worth." Ellie stepped forward, her boots crunching against the dry leaves and moss-covered stones. "What do we have to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Seraphis turned to face her, eyes gleaming with cold amusement. "You must survive the trials of this place. Each one will test you in ways you cannot predict. But remember this, failure means death. For you and your people." The stakes had never been clearer. Ellie glanced back at her team, their expressions grim. This wasn't just a fight for their survival. This was the moment that would determine whether humanity could ever coexist with the Xylar. And it was up to them to prove that they had the strength to endure whatever lay ahead. Seraphis gestured to the darkened passage that led deeper into the structure. "Enter, and do not falter. The trial begins now." Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Ellie and her team at the entrance. A chill ran down Ellie's spine, but she shook it off. She wasn't going to back down. Not now. "We've trained for this," Ellie said quietly to her team, trying to inject some confidence into her voice. "Stay together, watch each other's backs. We get through this, and we prove we belong here." The team nodded, and with one last glance at the jungle behind them, they stepped into the darkness. The interior of the structure was a labyrinth of stone corridors, winding through the heart of the ancient building. The air inside was thick, like it hadn't been disturbed for centuries. Strange symbols lined the walls, glowing faintly as they passed, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. Ellie's mind raced, trying to anticipate what was coming next, but the only sound was their footsteps echoing in the silence. Suddenly, a loud rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. The walls trembled, and the corridor ahead of them seemed to shift, the very stone moving of its own accord. A deep, guttural growl reverberated from the darkness ahead. "Get ready!" Ellie shouted, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was charged with an ominous energy, and every instinct screamed that something was about to attack. The first creature emerged from the shadows, a massive, hulking beast with multiple limbs and a thick hide, its eyes glowing with a fierce red light. It was unlike anything Ellie had ever seen, its jaws snapping as it lunged toward them. Ellie didn't hesitate. She raised her plasma rifle and fired, the energy bolt striking the creature in the chest. It howled in pain but didn't go down. It was still coming. "Fire," she shouted, and the team opened fire, their weapons blazing. But the creature was relentless. It was faster than they expected, its massive limbs swiping through the air with terrifying speed. Harris barely ducked in time as one of its claws missed him by inches. Reese moved quickly, drawing a combat knife from his belt and rushing the creature with a fierce cry. He slashed at its exposed underbelly, but the beast's tough hide absorbed the blow, and it retaliated with a brutal swipe that sent him crashing into the wall. The force of the impact left him gasping for air, his head spinning. Ellie's heart raced as the creature advanced again. It was clear that they weren't going to defeat it with conventional weapons. But they couldn't afford to hesitate. They had to find a way to kill it, or this would be the end of their mission. "Reese!" Ellie shouted, trying to get his attention. "Can you move?" "I'm good, Captain," he growled, forcing himself to his feet, blood dripping from his side. "I've got an idea." Ellie's eyes narrowed. "What?" Reese glanced at the walls, then at the beast. "Those symbols, there's something about them. Maybe they're a weakness." Without waiting for her approval, Reese sprinted toward the nearest symbol, his body moving with surprising agility despite his injuries. The creature lunged at him, but he ducked, narrowly avoiding its deadly claws. Ellie saw what he was doing. He was trying to lure the creature into the path of the symbols, hoping they'd trigger something. "Cover him!" Ellie shouted, and her team opened fire once again, providing Reese the moment he needed. With one final, desperate move, Reese reached the symbol and slammed his hand against the glowing stone. The ground trembled again, and suddenly, the walls around them came to life. Bright light erupted from the stone, flooding the chamber with an intense, blinding energy. The creature screamed as the light engulfed it, its massive body convulsing and then disintegrating into ash. The rumbling stopped, and the oppressive silence returned, broken only by the heavy breathing of Ellie's team. Reese staggered back, wiping blood from his brow. "Guess we found the trick," he muttered, his voice hoarse. Ellie breathed a sigh of relief but didn't let her guard down. This was only the beginning. "We survived," she said, her voice a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "And we're not done yet." They had passed the first test, but the real trial had only just begun. Ellie could feel it in her bones, the Xyla were watching, waiting for them to falter. And they couldn't afford to. Not now. Not ever. "You said,"